Beep, 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 beep. Welcome to the EDI Jester call off there. And happy afternoons, nights. Beep, beep. Okay. That went wrong, didn't it? I've got a cracker of a piece for you today. An absolute cracker. Oh, this is a storming piece of writing. Right, by Catherine Deves. Catherine is writing in The Spectator Australia, so in down under, cobber, right? The Australian, it's called How Our First Female PM Cancelled Women, right? It's so good. Oh, it's delicious. I was getting excited over my muesli. Right, so it is a terrible shame. This is from 2022, right? It's a terrible shame. The chief legacy of our first female prime minister seems to be her so-called misogyny speech, the sentiment of which certainly resounds with most women. I can't believe I've never seen this before. But properly understood, Julia Gillard's opposition to the then leader of the opposition's censure motion was inappropriate. The subject matter of the motion concerning allegations of serious parliamentary workplace sexual harassment by then House Speaker, right, who was called Peter Slipper. Peter Slipper, right, who compared female genitalia, get this, to shellless mussels, right? Not mussels as in seafood. Peter Slipper, the House Speaker, who compared female genitalia to shellless mussels. I can't just, what? That's surreal. Now, if you're in the pub, right, and you're having a joke with a few of your friends, right, and there's some, because we call the penis all sorts of things, don't we? Yeah. Meat and two veg, yeah. Bold Avenger. No, yeah. Call it all sorts, don't we? Purple dome to doom weapon. I've heard it. Pork sword. Loads of things I've heard it for porn. So it might be funny, but the Speaker of the House, can you imagine? I mean, what did he think he was doing? Shellless mussels. Of course, it opens us up to all sorts of quips, doesn't it? Minge Marnier. Or Muff Marnier. Don't look shocked. We've got Coq au vin. Oh, as I call it, loving a lorry, right? I couldn't get over it when I read this, right? You would be forgiven for thinking our then female Prime Minister, a trained lawyer, would respect the gravity of the allegations, both legally and as a matter of public policy, and decline to comment. The misogyny speech is not the only legacy of the Gillard government's overreach. In the dying days of her government legislation amending the Sex Discrimination Act 1984, the Marquee Act to eliminate discrimination against women in public life was introduced and enacted. Largely unnoticed at the time without critic or challenge, in the wake of the failed omnibus Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Bill 2012, the Sex Discrimination Amendment, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Intersex Status Act 2013 passed. It was Gillard's government's death rattle solution to arrange the demands of those in thrall to queer and gender theory activism, who'd schemed to denude law and policy of biological sex in favour of a self-declared gender identity. This is a historic example of where the rot set in a very similar legal way in Australia as it has done here in the UK. So a nice historical perspective from Australia in this excellent article. This type of hypocrisy should not be tolerated, said Gillard in her celebrated misogyny speech. But in the ultimate betrayal of Australian women and girls, she oversaw the erasure of the definition of woman, and with it, women and girls, as a legal category worthy of protection. The definition of a woman, meaning a member of the female sex irrespective of age, was repealed to instead accommodate the demands of men who want to be women. And we can now see, as we move forward to the present day, what has happened to lesbians in Australia. They've essentially eradicated the idea altogether. When's the LGB going to wake up, eh? Probably never. The SDA now makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person not only because of their sex, but also their gender identity, intersex status or sexual orientation. The effect on women's sex-based rights in Australia has been profound. Women's rights can only exist upon a recognition that we are biological females. The Gillard amendments impose the biggest game of willful pretend imaginable on women and girls, now forced to suspend their reality, and believe that a penis owner is a woman because he says so. This would be laughable if it was not so serious. On ABC Radio recently, Gillard asked, why aren't we further along with respect to gender equality? She blames the vile sewer of social media and women's difficult balancing act of work and family life. No mention at all of the alarming and increasing impact of her government's amendments to the Sexual Discrimination Act. Hardly surprising, as the burden being placed on women by these fundamental changes had not a single mention in the committee reports and parliamentary debates at the time. Again, as we saw, the lack of understanding, the lack of thought around women's rights, and certainly the rights of children and young people, and the rights of those who are same-sex attracted. It just repeats wherever you go, doesn't it? It's that damn Denton's document, isn't it? The SDA was enacted to implement the UN Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which Australia ratified in 1983. So we've now got the UN Convention coming into play here. Interesting historic perspective on that. Most countries have now done so, excluding the United States of America, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and the Holy See. Debate at the time was robust, but the importance of the convention and the contemplation of the legislature was such that it was included in its entirety in the schedule of the Act. Commonwealth legislation has constitutional validity if it gives effect to one of the heads of propositive power. Outlined exhaustively in Section 51, the SDA relies on the external affairs power in placitum. This is real lawyer speak, this, isn't it? The government of the time identified the external affairs power as the only one that could support all aspects of the Sex Discrimination Act. To be constitutionally valid, the Gillard amendments needed to implement an international obligation or secure a benefit under a treaty. So this is the external interference by such organisations as the UN, and certainly from our perspective, the European Union. So in the European Court of Human Rights, an interference in sovereignty, which led to the eradication of the concept of girls and women, and that now subsequently has led to the eradication of lesbian as a concept in law. This is terribly dangerous stuff. And people scream at me about we need to be doing X, Y, Z with so-and-so. We don't. We need to be retracting and getting out of every single piece of international obligatory nonsense that has been thrust upon us by unelected EU, or wherever the hell it may be, UNESCO, aparchiks. Right? That's what we need to do. We've got to pull away from all of it and say, no, we're not doing this, because the dangers of queer and gender ideology are so profound to a society. It's the only way that we can bring things back on track. The article goes on to talk about this in a much more legal perspective, which greater legal minds than I would be able to get their head around. But what I thought would be of interest to the predominant number of my UK listeners, which is the most of you are from the UK, some from Australia and some from Canada, is that there's the pattern. There's the pattern again. External forces outside the sovereignty of the individual country. External sources, in this case the United Nations, could have been the European Court of Human Rights, it could have been the European Union, it could be the World Health Organization, it could be United, any of them. It could be any of these organizations that were set up often for the best purposes post the war in some cases, and certainly to do good work in their own right. We seem to have forgotten that organisations, no matter what the organisation, no matter what the philosophical position, no matter what the political position of organisations is, that they all tilt to corruption, rancour and falsehood. It's inevitable. It always happens. It always happens. That's why companies rise and die, organisations rise and die, because they never know when to stop. And that's what we're seeing here. I just thought it was interesting that we can see exactly the same pattern as happened there in Australia as happened here in the UK. Please do go read the article. It's well worth a read. I'm so glad I found it. I'm so glad I found it. Really, I have. What a rude man. Peter Slipper. Somebody should give him one. Get over that jumping horse, boy. You're going to get the slipper. Oh, that takes me back. Right, okay. Go read, all right? Down under. Thank you. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.